Hello and welcome to my next project. It's called I Pimped My Wife's Scent Diffuser. These things were all over our house and looking a bit drab, so I decided to pimp them up, with a bit of resin of course. For some time now, I have been combining 3D printing and epoxy resin to produce items that can be turned on the wood lathe that under normal circumstances would be unthinkable. It all started off with a number of 3D prints which would be fitted together to enclose the diffuser so that a resin jacket could be cast and then turned on the lathe. The black cone-shaped print is to stay in the finished item with all the clear parts being turned away, to reveal a decorative cover to the otherwise bland diffuser. Quite a bit of thought was required in the design of the prints to enable me to centre each part in the lathe as I moved on in the project. All the parts were designed in Fusion 360 and printed in PLA on my trusty CR10 printer. You're properly thinking, this bloke's not for real, but the reality is my mind just runs away with itself, coming up with strange quirky things that give me an excuse not to do the dreaded housework. This part is covered with a layer of UV cured resin, which makes it impervious to epoxy. This stops the resin leaking through the mould during the curing process. Orange and green resin. These two layers of resin are going to create the embellishment for the piece. I cut out a whole load of small parallelograms on the CNC. The reason the black cone was not going to be turned away was because its inside surface was already the correct shape of the diffuser. This would save on trying to turn the resin cast to the correct shape later. Each parallelogram was applied to the black cone with superglue. They were arranged with the top and bottom rows pointing one way and the middle row pointing in the other. I spent quite a lot of time on this, but it was worth it in the end, even though the colours changed from orange and green to yellow and blue later on. I think this was because the black resin added later reduced the amount of light being reflected back, unless of course you know better. If so, please let me know. These are the outer layers of the mould which are glued into place. I nearly always use super glue to stick printed parts together, mainly because it's pretty much instant, although it can be a bit messy sometimes. Both moulds were given a coat of latex rubber to try and prevent any unwanted leaks when the resin is poured. I learned a small lesson here. I had left 5mm holes to allow all the air to escape from the top of the mould. But this backfired, causing 2 or 3 quite large air bubbles to be trapped when the resin had set. This small problem you will see overcome later on in the project. Well, it's time for a bit of turning. I'm using a square carbide scraper, which is ideal for removing the printed moulds. They just come off so easily, like a knife through butter. Once the mould is removed, I have to be aware that I have only about 4mm or 1/4 of an inch resin thickness to gain the shape required. Now the mould is removed, I started on the resin surface to make sure all the excess resin covering the parallelograms was turned away. Not quite there yet, just a little bit more cleaning up to do. As you can see, there are a few large air bubbles that have been uncovered. These need some attention in the form of some UV cured resin, built up in layers until the holes are full. They are then sanded down to match the rest of the turned surface. The piece has been turned around in the chuck and the top of the mould is now turned off. I had to be very careful here to only turn off the mould as the measurement was vital, with virtually no clearance between this piece and the base. I've turned the piece around again to cut off the bottom of the mould. The mould thickness and about 2 mm spare. That's it, turning complete for the top cover. Now, it's time for the bottom. I know it might seem to the keen observer that I had this all planned, but that's not the case. This is the only one of these that I attempted to make. It just so happens to my complete amazement that the way I thought it should go just worked, and it didn't just end up in the bin, like so many first tries do. The turning of the base at this stage consisted of removing the inner and outer moulds. With all the inside and outside of the mould removed, both parts are lined up and turned to shape. They are then followed by some sanding. I think it's probably obvious that a lot of cleanup and sanding was carried out other than that in the video. This was omitted to reduce boredom factor. To ensure the bottom of the cover will stay in place, a hole is drilled through the diffuser bottom and the bottom cover. They are then held together with a countersunk M3 bolt. This is typical of a bit of poor practice when working in the wonky donkey shed. That was nearly stuck in my finger. Anyway, now for the finishing. A number of coats of lacquer with sanding in between. Finally, a super glossy finish. Next, beauty shots. Well, that's it. A very enjoyable project for me. Even the wife was happy. Hope you liked it, and thanks for watching. Till next time. Please feel free to leave your comments below. Thank you.